Thank you for joining today. My name is Yasmin Robinson, and I am the Environmental Review Program Administrator here at the Environmental Quality Board. Also behind the scenes on WebEx is my colleague, Marty Benson, who will be putting things into the chat for you and will be pulling the strings behind the scenes. And we also have Denise Wilson, Director of the Environmental Review Program, who will be joining us during the Q&A session today. So this is the fourth installment of the Climate Change and Environmental Review Speaker Series. Through 2022, we will be holding speaker series events, cohort meetings, and sending out surveys in support of the Climate Change and Environmental Review pilot program. So if you have any suggestions about future topics or speakers, please let us know in the chat, or you can email and we will follow up with you. I know there's a lot of different topics that we could cover, so it's helpful for us to hear from you about what you would like to know, what you would like to hear. A few other items, as per usual today, the cohort meeting will begin at 2 p.m. for registered pilot participants. So if you are a cohort member, feel free to reserve your questions for the cohort meeting. And also just a reminder that we are recording today's session, and that recording will be posted on the EQB website, which also includes all of the other past speaker sessions. So if you've missed some over the last few months, you can go back and check those out on the website. Let's see here. Any other? No other business. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to introduce today's speakers. We have Louise Miltich, Energy Program Director at the Minnesota Department of Commerce's Energy Environmental Review and Analysis Division, and Dr. Kenneth Blumenfeld, Senior Climatologist at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Division of Ecological and Water Resources State Climatology Office. I got all of that out. So I will hand it over first to Louise to share her presentation.
Sure, let me give the sharing a try here. We did try this out beforehand, so it should be easy peasy. Let's see here. If you could let me know if you can see that. That'd be great. Okay, I'm getting the thumbs up, so that's very positive. Thank you, Yasmin, for the introduction. I am really pleased to get a chance to be here. I think we've been participating in the pilot program, and even before the pilot program, with kind of moving in the direction and working with EQB on this concept of incorporating climate change and greenhouse gas more consistently into our environmental review documents. Like Yasmin said, I am with the Energy Environmental Review and Analysis Unit at the department. Congratulations to Kenny for having a more complicated title and name of the program. I'm going to call my program EERA because it is complex enough that we like to have an acronym there. I oversee the Environmental Review Program, EERA, at the department, and I have a group of 8 project managers. Well, I think technically it's 7 right now, and I'll put in a shameless plug. We have an open position, so we're hoping to snag someone. If we have to go back into the breach, I invite everyone to apply. So I'm going to try and go to the next slide here. Here we go. Really brief outline of what I'm going to cover today. I'll give you just an overview of our program for context. It's kind of a unique and odd sort of scenario we have going on, and a little bit different than the rest of the group, the rest of the RGU agencies. I will talk through a case study, one of our recent environmental review documents, and two of my project managers here in my group sort of waded into the land of looking at climate change and environmental review and incorporating greenhouse gas emission calculations. I will focus on the climate change component though. And then I'll talk a little bit through next steps. Like I said, we just kind of dipped our toes in the water, and I think we have aspirations and ideas now of how to move forward and areas where we need to focus a little bit more and become more adept. So I'll just give you, like I said, some context. I'm with the department, and the department conducts environmental review on behalf of the Public Utilities Commission. My staff used to actually be EQB staff, so EQB is near and dear to all of our hearts. But back in 2005, the program, the Energy Infrastructure Siting Program, was moved from the Environmental Quality Board. Staff went over to the Department of Commerce. Decision-making on the large energy infrastructure projects that we review was moved over to the Public Utilities Commission. So we have kind of a unique role in that we function basically as technical consultants to the Public Utilities Commission. We prepare the environmental review documents, but technically the PUC is actually the responsible governmental unit for all these facilities that are going through environmental review. We provide agency coordination, public outreach as part of that process. And we don't take an advocacy role. We really just bring the facts through our environmental review document over to the commission. They make the ultimate decision on the adequacy of the environmental review, as well as a decision on what site or route to permit. And then we do have a responsibility after the permit is issued around compliance. We also work with downstream permitting agencies. So agencies like the PCA, the DNR, they're required to participate in the environmental review process so that they can raise red flags before a decision gets in front of the Public Utilities Commission. And then, they do permitting for downstream activities. I'll run through the kinds of things we're talking about when we say energy infrastructure and the kinds of energy infrastructure projects that are permitted by the PUC. Transmission lines, so transmission lines greater than 100 kilovolts and 1,500 feet in length go through the Public Utilities Commission process and we review them. Fossil fuel generating plants greater than 50 megawatts. We also do review pipelines, so that's oil pipelines and intrastate natural gas pipelines, as well as a few other kinds of pipelines. We review wind farms greater than 5 megawatts and solar facilities greater than 50 megawatts. We expect to be seeing some solar facilities with storage too, so that'll be part of our review and permitting process soon. I'll walk you through, like I said, we have a little bit of a different process, but I think there are some key differences, but key similarities to what folks are doing through the EAW form. We perform environmental assessments as one of our types of analysis. I think the key difference between the environmental assessment and an environmental assessment worksheet is that we do look at alternatives to the extent that those are proposed as part of scoping. So we have that ability, which is a little different than the EAW. And we have no element where we apply decision criteria to make a determination about an EIS. There is no EIS after an EA. It just is what it is. Some key similarities, though, and I think what makes this case study relatable is that generally an EA has kind of a similar level of analysis. It's not diving into the really extensive type of evaluation that happens in EIS. And in general, it's the same types of resources that we're evaluating. Things like groundwater, surface water, cultural and historic resources.
Oh, I think we just may have lost Louise. See if we can get her back here. Louise, can you hear me? Well, in the meantime, while we try to get Louise back, maybe we can, let's see. Oh, her slide is back.
I'm back.
Okay, there you are.
I think being in the office, that I would be safe from whatever connection issues may have caused that. But
It's okay. Please go on.
let me reshare, and if you could, I was probably talking to myself for a bit there. So uh, tell me if you
Why don't you go
heard.
back to your previous slide?
Sure. There we go. I don't know how much of this one you got,
I think
but
you might have cut off at the end of you talking about the EA.
okay, so I talked a little bit about the key differences between an EA and an EAW, and then kind of key similarities. Did we get through that together?
I think it was right at that point.
Okay, so we prepare environmental assessments as one of the types of environmental review documents that we do. There are a few key differences, but also some similarities, which I think make our process relatable and our case study relatable to other RGUs that are doing EAWs. The key differences, I think, are that we look at alternatives. So we have alternative sites and routes that we look at, and that's not typical for an EAW. We also don't apply any decision criteria at the end of our EA. It just is what it is. It's an EA, and there's no decision about an EIS after that. But key similarities, which I think are probably more important for today, generally, an EA has a similar level of analysis to an EAW, not the complex, really, diving into the weeds type of evaluation that you get in an EIS. And we generally evaluate the same types of resources: groundwater, surface water, historic and cultural resources. We do have some mandatory EIS categories. Not going to really touch on those today because we're focused on EAW type analysis. And then we have a unique process in that the site permitting is really tied in with the environmental review. It's a mashup process. And the site permits that are ultimately issued after the environmental review is complete, they cover both construction and, in the case of wind and solar, they cover operation. And the time frame for those permits extends usually 30 years. I want to just touch on what the greenhouse gas and climate change information that we're trying to now incorporate more thoroughly into our environmental review documents, just highlight what it can do for us, because we want it to be useful and used. So as far as greenhouse gas emissions information goes, we are looking at alternatives, gives us a chance to look at different technologies and techniques, both from the perspective of alternatives, but then also just design mitigation types of questions. The Public Utilities Commission also uses the social cost of carbon in their evaluations of integrated resource plans for utilities. And that is a concept that we can incorporate into our environmental review documents. And there's a nice framework over at the PUC for thinking about things in terms of social cost of carbon. As far as the climate information goes, I think the key for us is to look at how permit conditions can be protective given the risks of climate change and known either through things we know about climate trends, but also in terms of uncertainties, and including permit conditions that can help the robustness of projects in the face of that uncertainty. So that's all part of kind of improved planning. Whoops, jumped ahead there. So this is the little case study that I have. I'm stealing this a little bit from one of my project managers, Ray Kirsch, and he was assisted by Andrew Levi in the preparation of an EA for the 150 megawatt Hayward solar project. It's a solar farm is located in Freeborn County, Minnesota. You can see the map here. The red dot kind of shows you where it is in relation to the rest of the state of Minnesota. And then the map shows you the boundary of the site. The hatched area is where the solar panels will go. We got other infrastructure shown on the map as well, and then different project components. This facility will occupy about 1,300 acres of land, just east of the city of Hayward, and just south, you can see, of Interstate 90. The project will use PD solar panels that are mounted on linear tracking systems, and it will interconnect with the electrical grid via a little, you can see it up in the northwest corner, a switching station. And that plugs into the existing Hayward Murphy Creek 161 kilovolt transmission line. So in terms of process, the EA has been prepared. Put a link on there if people want to go take a look at that EA. It's kind of a nice interactive document. Scoping was completed first. That's the first step with an EA. Ray and Andrew worked together to get that EA completed. It's just presenting, like I said, what are the facts? We don't take an advocacy role. We just pass the facts to the commission. But there is a step with a public hearing because it's kind of the mashup process, like I said, with permitting. So the hearing is complete, and this project will soon be in front of the Public Utilities Commission for a final decision on both the adequacy of our environmental review and the issuance of the site permit. These are just kind of a few visuals to help you get a sense of what the components of the project look like. The picture over to the left is a typical setup with the PV panels mounted on linear tracking systems. And then the other two pictures, the one sort of up to the top and to the right, are the infrastructure components of it, like the interconnection components. So in preparing the environmental review document and thinking about how to incorporate climate change, like I said, it's really Ray and Andrew were just dipping their toes into the water, trying to get a start, doing the best we could with the information we had. And like I said, we're going to learn more. That's part of why Kenny is here. It's here to help us. But we thought through questions like, what does climate change look like in terms of the frequency and intensity of rainfall events? How could we think through how rainfall impacts these kinds of projects? Frequency and severity of damaging storms. That was another climate change concept we wanted to make sure we sort of entertained and thought about what these things could mean for the project. Same with frequency and severity of heat wave events. Wanted to kind of explore that as a topic. And then frequency and severity of drought events can also have an impact potentially on these kinds of projects. So like I said, Kenny's going to help us here. These were just some of the kinds of questions that we thought through. So there are two kind of components to the impact assessment that you would find in that EA. There's, thinking through construction and how would the kinds of questions on the previous slide potentially impact construction. And we looked at construction stormwater management. It could impact soil handling and erosion control. Sometimes the timing of construction could be impacted, and then potentially things like dust suppression, depending on availability of water during drought events. Then the second component was to think through impacts during the operation phase of the project. So things like long-term stormwater management, electricity production, potential damage to panels just from extreme storm events, possibly. And then I highlighted here vegetation establishment because I think there's I'm going to go through a little example, and thinking through how might climate change affect things like vegetation establishment. I pulled some permit language from a PUC permit because this is one of the ways we suggest mitigations that can be included as permit conditions. So this language is just an example of something that's existing in a permit, but in thinking through issues related to climate change, this area, vegetation management, is one where I think it's a thought exercise that's worth looking at. This permit condition requires planning in advance of construction of the project for what reestablishment of vegetation on the site will look like. And the components of that are sort of soil handling and erosion control, establishment of native vegetation, which is of course dependent on weather and climate factors. And there's a component of stackable benefits here too, which are less about the impacts of climate on the project and more about the ways that climate impacts things that are impacted by the project, and ways we can mitigate those impacts and in fact enhance the environment for potentially species that are impacted by climate. There are also some potential carbon sequestration benefits. And I just wanted to offer kind of a visual of why we might want to think through climate factors. This is, of course, I'll say these are not photos of Hayward. Of course, it hasn't been permitted or constructed. This is a different site, but I just want to kind of highlight the sorts of issues that we would think through when we think about extreme rainfall type events. In that planning document, we can think through and plan ahead for big precipitation events and hopefully try to avoid some of what the outcome you see here with on the left side, heavy duty erosion, and on the right side, a more successful, post-planning establishment of what they hoped to have right there at that location. So they're the same spot on the left, and then more successful outcome there at that spot after some time on the right. Similar, you can kind of see how erosion can occur at a site with really heavy rain events, and then on the right-hand side, that's a picture of what success might look like. So just those are pretty stark contrast in the kinds of things we want to be thinking about when we think about how climate might change the intensity of rainfall events. In terms of next steps, if you go look at the EA, the section on climate change is not particularly long, and it just thinks through the kinds of concepts that I highlighted. There's a lot more we could be thinking about. Kenny is going to help us with highlighting different climate parameters that we maybe should look into going forward and think through how they might impact the projects that we're reviewing. I also think it's worth, and this isn't really part of the discussion today because we're going to look at climate parameters, but also in terms of the impacts of a project on resource areas where there's also a climate change impact. So maybe threatened and endangered species or groundwater quality. We want to think through how those might overlap, and that's probably a discussion for a different day. We'd like to also expand our understanding of what the potential solutions would be. What kinds of engineering solutions are there? And how can those kinds of things be incorporated into a permit, into a mitigation plan? The project I highlighted is a solar facility. We also need to work on kind of expanding our thinking so that we can start applying these concepts for high voltage transmission line projects. We're probably going to see more of those in the relatively near future. Pipeline projects as well. And just kind of the full range of different energy infrastructure projects that we look at. That's all I have. I tried not to go too long there because I know we want there to be plenty of time for discussion. There's my contact information, and then just a couple links to resources that folks might enjoy looking at. And with that, my portion is complete, and I'll turn it over to Kenny, who probably has a lot more meaty information that people will benefit from. So I'm going to stop sharing if I can.
Great.
And it'll be
Thank
Kenny's
you so
turn.
much, Louise.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Kenny, you should be ready to share.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Louise. Let's see how much we can accomplish here. I am going to share my screen. Okay. Yeah, my name is Kenny Blumenfeld. I am a climate scientist with the DNR. You don't have to worry about all those acronyms in my title. The DNR is a complex organization. So I work for the Department of Natural Resources. We are in the state climatology office, which is part of the water monitoring and surveys unit within the Division of Ecological and Water Resources. But we don't, nobody needs to know that except for a few people doing paperwork in our division. Anyway, I'm going to try and help you understand what's going on with our climate, just kind of a snapshot, and then some tools you can use to make assessments essentially. So let's just start with a snapshot of the observed and also projected climate changes. This is quick, okay? So we're looking at winter temperatures, rainfall, or generally precipitation, snowfall, heat waves and extreme heat, drought, and then what you might think of as severe convective weather or tornadoes, hail, and thunderstorm winds. And in the middle column, and this is all, Yasmin, I shared this with you. You can share this with the participants. It belongs to the public. So if anyone needs more information, I'll make it available. Uh, in the middle column is what we've observed. Basically, I shouldn't have said through the 2010s. It's really through last year. But these are the trends that we are confident about. So winter temperatures have been increasing rapidly. That doesn't mean every single year. We still have normal ups and downs. Our climate will always have normal ups and downs, but by and large, winters have been getting warmer than they used to be. Precipitation has been increasing in all seasons. Now that doesn't mean every single year, but on average, typical year, typical season, getting wetter than it used to be or what used to be thought of as, quote, normal. Snowfall also has been on average, well, at least holding steady or increasing. And we've certainly seen with both regular precipitation or rainfall and snowfall, we've seen more and sometimes larger extreme events. When we think of heat waves and extreme heat, we have not yet observed a trend. In other words, there's no indication that our climate has been giving us more heat waves, more frequent heat waves, or worse heat waves. However, we have observed that the season for heat waves has been expanding, and this is just what we have observed. Uh, Drought is interesting because when we look at the frequency, its duration, and the amount of space that it takes up on the map, we've actually seen it decreasing in recent decades. That's because we've been getting a lot wetter. However, the severity of drought has remained when we have it. So it's been less frequent, it's taken up less time on the calendar and taken up less space on the map. But then when we've had drought, we've seen its severity is comparable to what we would have expected historically. And tornadoes, hail, and strong thunderstorm winds, that kind of suite that we call severe convective weather, really it's been very hard to establish any trends, but just like heat, we've seen the season expanding. So for example, March and April tornadoes becoming a bit more common, even those October or last year, December tornadoes becoming uh, we didn't used to observe that kind of weather very frequently, if at all. And so the season has expanded, even though there's no real evidence that we're seeing more tornadoes or that they're bigger. And the same is true with hail and strong thunderstorm winds. So that's what we've observed. If you look over to the right column, so you can use this table as kind of a quick cheat sheet. What's happening in Minnesota, what's expected to happen in Minnesota based on the science or based on the modeling. Our winter temperatures are going to keep increasing with a general narrowing of what we think of as winter. Precipitation is projected to continue increasing, although there's some uncertainty about the timing. Is more of it going to come in the early growing season versus the late growing season? That's still uncertain, but the continued increases, including continued extreme events becoming more common, and more extreme at times, those are projected to continue so that the 2050s will be wetter, most likely than the 2010s, something like that anyway. Snowfall, seasonal decreases appear likely when we get into the middle of the century, but there's still a lot of suggestion that those extreme events are going to keep getting heavier. So you might get less snowfall throughout the season, but you might have more big snowfall events. For heat waves and extreme heat, The projections are actually pretty clear that this is coming to Minnesota. It's just that the climate data are also very clear that we have not really observed those increases yet. We don't know exactly when it will begin. So we just say, we follow the science by 2050, if not sooner. So we would expect, in the decades ahead and possibly sooner, to start seeing increases in the frequency and even the severity of heat waves. Drought, this is where it gets real murky. We see increases are possible for the frequency, the duration, and the aerial coverage, but that increases are likely when we talk about the severity of drought. So even if drought remains kind of uncommon or even less common than it used to be, those episodes could be worse, especially when you are factoring in the increases that eventually will come in terms of extreme heat. Again, this is so there's a kind of a lot to unpack there. And then for tornadoes, hail, and thunderstorm winds, the projections are actually unclear. There's definitely no consensus on this. I would assume, you should assume that they will continue to be part of our climate and we will have very busy and active years, kind of like the one that's begun here. And then we will also have some down years where not much happens in terms of severe convective storms, like much of the 2010s. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we are. And now, in terms of tools that you might use to help answer, to get some basic information about our climate, uh, what I want to do is highlight some of our highest quality, most relevant tools for climate planning in Minnesota. It's not always for adaptation, but if you're, trying to make some project resilient for the future, we're really talking about resiliency and adaptation. For this presentation specifically, we're going to talk about tools and resources for understanding our climate at multiple scales, whether we're talking about time scales or geographical scales, past, present, and future. And the tools that I'm going to share can be used for presentations or planning or for, just giving you an understanding for filling out the worksheet, for documents, case studies, etc. You can use the tools as is. In other words, you can just take what's provided out of the box, or in many cases, you can get data and then, uh, plot the data in Excel or some other program. It's for some of these tools that I'm going to share with you, you'll see little dots on the map, and you just have to keep in mind whenever we're showing you dots that you can click on, those are individual climate stations that measure temperature and precipitation on a daily basis. And there is some quality that varies from place to place. These are official NOAA, what's called the Climate Cooperative Network Program, but there is still variations in data quality from station to station. If you have questions, you can just contact us. And I gave you 3 different ways to contact. I'm kind of your main point of contact for now with this. And so contact me, but my colleagues here can obviously help with any tools and any interpretation of climate data also. I just try not to burden them with things when they've got their own objectives. So I always tell people to come up with a question, and these are just some sample questions. Has it become wetter or drier in my area, or is the growing season? I can't tell you for your project um, what the main questions of interest are going to be. That's for you to define. Is the growing season getting warmer or cooler, or what proportion of months have been tending to be warm or cold or wet or dry? What is normal? Um, these are all questions that may help you kind of get a sense of things. Some of the more immediate ones, like what happened last year, I understand that might be good for different purposes, but I'm not sure how useful that is for a worksheet unless it's a specific case in point. It's also important to keep in mind there's some things that the tools and the data that you're using can't do. We don't have everything under the sun. We're kind of used to in our office telling people, yeah, sorry, there isn't anything for that. Certain types of data on solar radiation or on wind speeds are very hard to look at historical analyses, and they're very hard to do projections. What other information would help? This is all feedback that maybe you could give our office or just give this whole process. So I wanted to start with the Climate Explorer tool. This gives you historical climate and also projections for Minnesota. Now, what would be easiest is if I just showed you live how to do this, but in the interest of time, we're just going to go through some screenshots. However, I could probably, let's see if I can do this. I can give you the, I think I can, well, maybe not. I'll put, after I'm done presenting, I'll put all of these links right in the chat so you don't have to try and transcribe them. So what this tool does, a lot of words here, but it helps you graph and analyze both past and also projected future climate at a variety of scales. And so what you do is you specify where you're interested in looking. You choose a climate variable or some month or months to examine, and whether you're interested in historical data or projected future data. The historical tab on this tool, so you see it back here, there's a historical and a projected tab. Um, these uh, these give you different types of display. So the historical tab creates a time series for you, which means you get a single value for each year. So if it's May through September, it'll give you the average or the sum of whatever you're looking at for every May through September for the period you specified. If you are looking at the future, you instead will get a range, a series of ranges, including the averages for a bunch of different models that are making projections for the middle and the end of the 21st century. The easiest thing for me to just give you an example here. So I used the Mississippi River Brainerd watershed. You could also choose from counties. We've got a bunch of different sort of geographical area types. We know watersheds are really popular with our users. We have a lot of people working at the watershed scale. So I just want to show you that I chose all of the default options here, except for I made this selection of this particular watershed. There are ways to select multiple watersheds or counties as long as they touch each other. The only thing I changed was I changed here. Let's do a comparison from the 20th century averages, and let's look at the trend, the recent trend of 1970 through 2021. The default is average temperature for the month of January. I hit plot data and I get this nice graph. I can also download the data from this file that's created, and then I could open it up in Excel or whatever I want to do, make my own graph, because these default graphs are made to be simple and fast, might not match the style of what you're using. But this gives you a lot of information. What's happened to January temperatures, annual average January temperatures in this watershed historically. And you can see recently there's been kind of an increase, so that since 1970 we've got this pretty sharp trend. It's actually very sharp, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit increase per decade. So January is getting much, much warmer in this area. And most Januaries, but not all of them, but most of them have been above that 20th century average in recent years. You can see the normal ups and downs that are part of our climate along the way, and that maroon line, if you can see that slanted line, that's a trend. That's a trend line. So that's kind of one version. Now, what if we want to take the same question, what's happened with January temperature, and then move it into the future? So we can then just click on that projected future tab, and our graph that we just had is going to go bye-bye, and we're going to get a new graph. And on the far left, what you have is a bunch of different models that are just showing you how well they tried to look at the range of January temperatures. And then you've got basically three different windows that you're looking at, what's happening with January temperatures. And this is just to give you a set of ranges, right? And by the way, this tool has help icons all over the place. So at every step, you can get more information, you can get metadata. So this isn't a full tutorial and all of this. This is, by the way, all of this information was provided. The projected information is from the University of Minnesota. They did some specific climate modeling for our state. All of the historical information comes from NOAA. This is all documented, by the way, in the tool through these different icons, through the FAQ, and through the metadata. So this is a pretty powerful tool that gets you a lot of summary information. What if you want to know, for my location, what's normal? Just so this is a different tool. This is called a Climatograph. It's real simple. It just tells you kind of what a typical year looks like in terms of monthly temperature, monthly precipitation, the range between the highs and the lows, and you know how much what you'd expect. So you just click on one of these dots on the map and you're going to get that kind of simple graph. It's nice if you want to say, okay, the annual average temperature is blank, or the average July temperature, average high temperature is, you know, 83.2, and the average low temperature in January is 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit. That'll help you get kind of summary information. It's not going to tell you lots of details beyond these sort of normal statistics, but this is based on something called a normal value that's calculated by NOAA um, every 10 years. What if you want to look at kind of recent trends, so monthly temperature or precipitation departures from normal, so that you can kind of get a sense of the pattern or the of those ups and downs. So the example we have here is for temperatures. It's the same thing. Remember, these are dot maps, so there's going to be some variation in the quality of the data from station to station. But you can use these to kind of look at, well, was it warmer or cooler than normal recently? You can also use this to expand or change the range so that you're looking at a different a different a different set of years and comparing those to the, again, the current normals. So you can again see the ups and downs in our climate along the way. I'm not going to go through all the steps with you. It's actually pretty self-explanatory. The reason I'm sharing these tools is because these are easy. We made them for users who aren't climatologists. They're pretty self-explanatory, but certainly the presentation will also help you, you know, if you want to follow the steps. We also have finer scale data that's summarized at either the monthly or the daily level for all these individual stations that show up on this map. It's the same thing where you click on one of those balloons and then you're going to get some choices. This is a little better for kind of deep analysis. So again, you select the location, you select whether you want daily or monthly data, and then you use the data to do your own analyses. This tool doesn't have any graphing capabilities for you or anything. It's just a data retrieval tool. And whatever station you select, its default is it's going to give you everything. But you can do really cool things. Like I actually created this graph from the exact same data in this exact same tool here. From the station out, it's out in western Minnesota, just off the Minnesota River. It's called Milan. Looks like it's Milan. And this is a graph. It's actually kind of a sophisticated graph, and you could get all of these data for this graph. It's average snowfall, average by season, plus the number of days between March and November, summarized by decade, uh, that were where the low temperature remained above freezing. So you can look at things like combination of snowfall days. So really, it's up to you to decide what you want to do with these data. But this is a nice option for those who maybe have someone on staff or are personally interested or see that there's a good reason to kind of dive deep. Again, use our office as a resource. If you get confused after you've started using these tools, we're happy to help. This last one is really, really cool. This is created by the DNR Watershed Health Assessment Framework Group, and they worked with me to make sure all of the data, they took the same data that were in the Climate Explorer tool, and they just made a separate tool out of it. And what this gets you is an interactive PDF that, that I'm going to just try and share this. Okay, I'm going to reshare, and I'm going to choose a different screen now so that you can see. Okay, hopefully you can see this interactive PDF. All of these are clickable. So this is a PDF you could just click on. I'm going to click that same watershed, and you get a full report. And it's comprehensive. And it's the only thing is it's only current through 2018, but it gives you all kinds of maps of minimum temperature and graphs, and then you start doing, you know, how have things changed, really sophisticated graphs. This is just generated on the fly for whichever watershed you click on. It is only available at the watershed scale. It's not available for any other geographic area type, but you know where you are and you can use this, and it will be, you know, it would be valid if your area is slightly larger than or smaller than the watershed that you're in. And there's tons of information in here. So that's what I have. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I think we can move to the next phase. So I just wanted to thank everybody. And again, I tried to give it to you 2 or 3 ways here. There's my email address, and my email address and my phone number are available to you. So contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we do have a few minutes here for some questions. And for those of you who may not be familiar with how to raise your hand in WebEx, should be a little hand icon in the at the bottom of your screen. So if you click that icon, your hand will raise, and if you click it again, your hand will lower. If you are on your phone, click the button with the 3 dots, and you should be able to raise your hand that way. So I'll leave that up for a second so everyone can get their bearings.
I do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
In regards to the ArcGIS map from Kenneth, it was, what climate mitigations do these projected data sets presume?
Okay, I missed I'm going to read the question. Can you say I don't see a question in there, so can you say that again?
It is, what climate mitigations do these projected data sets presume?
Oh, yeah, that's a great, very good question. So these are the representative concentration pathway 4.5 and 8.5. Now, I don't expect folks necessarily to know what that means. And technically, I guess, think of it like this. The 4.5 is basically the route that we are on currently. And the 8.5 would be if we stay on this route, but also make no real improvements. It's often called a worst case scenario, and it should really be considered to be, and the only frame where you get that is at the end of the 21st century, because there's no real difference in the middle of the 21st century between the 4.5 and the 8.5. But at the end of the century, there's a big divergence. It's considered a worst case scenario, and honestly, it's not a particularly likely one. So we think of it as, a lot of scientists have been using that 8.5 as sort of the high end of what would happen if we do absolutely nothing, so that people will get a sense of how sort of bad things could be. But it's not a particularly realistic, or likely, I should say. It's realistic if we don't do anything. But it's not particularly likely because there've been already some changes in greenhouse gas emission technologies and whatnot that have maybe steered us a little bit downward from that. And so that's mitigation in this sense would be considered at the global level. It's the sort of total greenhouse gas emissions, the difference between kind of I would say a poor to underperforming scenario with 4.5, where we continue to not meet our goals, but we're not completely off of the rails. And there's a lot of nuance in there that I could go pretty deep into. I mean, like, even in that scenario, we're globally in a lot of trouble, but versus the worst case scenario, which is almost incomprehensible. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks. I think we do have time for one more question, and looks like we have Amelia Voss, one of our esteemed past speakers. You should be ready to ask your question, Amelia.
Hi, Amelia Voss from MCEA. Thanks so much for both of these presentations. I think this is a question for Louise, and I was just wondering if the EAW form that's being piloted is adopted, whether there would be kind of any formal adoption of any of the climate analyses from that form into the EA, and or what the process would be to kind of formally add more climate analysis to the EA.
Sure, that's a really good question. So when we perform our environmental review through the EA, we don't have a form. We have a table of contents that we develop. You know, we have kind of our standard, and then we develop further during the scoping period, kind of formal incorporation of the concept of you know, climate change impacts on the project, impacts of the project on resources also impacted by climate change, is incorporated through the scoping document to some extent. And certainly my staff will look to whatever guidance comes out from the EQB and can be informed by the language in the questions, because we can go kind of pluck out of the EAW form, you know, here are the key questions around groundwater related to climate change. Here are some of the kind of adaptation type questions, but there isn't within our universe any kind of formal, this is the form that we use for every EA. So we really look to the scoping document and then the you know, best practices that my staff can adopt from the EAW. So that's a great question.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
So it looks like we are right up to the end here. I have one quick thing to share with everybody before we go to our next 2 p.m. cohort meeting. So I just want to thank everyone again for staying tuned. There is more information about the pilot program on the EQB website. And again, if you have questions, comments, suggestions for speakers, please let us know. We're really interested in providing speakers that are helpful, you know, for everybody's environmental review practice. And I also want to say stay tuned for June, where we will have a panel discussion with a group of very experienced legal practitioners that will share their perspectives on historic legal challenges, lessons learned from the administrative records of recent legal challenges, and considerations when creating an effective administrative record. So I think that will be another really useful session. So yeah, we'll be sending out communications for June in the next week or two. Can't believe June is already almost here. And then, so cohort folks, you should have received a calendar invite with your link, and we will see you over there in 1 minute at 2 p.m. So thank you, everyone.